It's been a big week for Ukraine. First on Friday, Russian leader Vladimir Putin visited Donald Trump in Alaska. Then yesterday, European leaders joined Volodymyr Zelenskyy for his visit to Washington. It's been a bit of a rollercoaster, but we'll be diving into all of the reactions and giving our own analysis, as well as trying to explain why Poland wasn't there yesterday. My name is Stash Kaleta. I'm an editor of the Weekly Outlook.
And I'm Wojciech Przybylski. I'm editor-in-chief of Visegrad Insight.
Today is the 19th of August, and we hope you enjoy the episode.
Welcome to the Visegrad Insight podcast.
We bring you global experts on the future of democracy, security, and economy.
The leading voices from Central Europe and on Central Europe.
Hosted by editors of Visegrad Insight.
Powered by Publica Foundation from Warsaw, Poland.
Okay, so Wojciech, my first question was going to be what your analysis, what your response is. We're fresh off of this meeting yesterday with the European leaders and Trump. What did you make of this? What did you make of Vladimir Putin's visit last week?
Right, so my first response to that is that actually, thanks God we were in there. And it might be counterintuitive because Poland has been priding itself to be the core supporter of Ukraine's cause for survival and for peace, as well as the key country that was rallied most of European leaders, the big five, to pay up to Ukrainian sovereignty because it's part of a European security. And the demand for this security requires that the payments are made. So the will to fight, will to resist aggression can be measured essentially in taxation, in how much money European countries are willing to pay up to support Ukraine, financially, militarily, in all the domains that are necessary to uphold the Ukrainian statehood. So we have seen, and the practical outcome of the meeting from yesterday is that European leaders are going to pay up. There is a talk of 100 billion euro commitment to Ukrainian purchases in the US that strengthens transatlantic bond, that allows European countries, Western European countries that had their relationship with America, and especially America under Trump, under strain, let's say, because of the disagreements over the economy, over paying for security, all these things that not just Trump said, but in much more diplomatic terms have been reverberated throughout different administrations in the past 20, 25 years. So Poland wasn't there because Poland is paying up for security. And in this respect, it didn't have to be among those who commit financially, as Trump now clearly expects. And he was satisfied that this also comes on board. It was dramatically different atmosphere. And I have to admit, we spoke before this recording about that. And I think, Stash, you say your part here, but I think the atmosphere gives a flavor, a completely different flavor, as if family reunion coming together after a deep fight and standing together because that's the right thing to do. And I think that's absolutely a great message. Maybe Poland and Central Europe is missing from the picture, but we have there Alexander Stubb from Finland, president of Finland, who's representing the countries that are bordering with Russia. He's not centrist in Europe per se, but he's the essential part of the front line of NATO against potential Russian aggression.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, first of all, it's a very interesting take, and I think very important to be realistic about what is coming out of these things, right? When you read the news and reactions, I think the reaction was generally positive to yesterday's meeting. Trump confirmed America provided Ukraine with very good protection, very good security. The British Prime Minister Keir Starmer said that there had been a real breakthrough in Trump's thinking, describing an Article 5-like guarantee, quote unquote. And as you said, this $100 billion weapons deal to win security guarantees. And actually, even the European Parliament, it was Roberto Metsola, described it as a game changer for a path to peace. But the thing that comes out of this is, what happens next, right? Will there be a trilateral meeting where Zelensky can join? Where will that be? Vladimir Putin cheekily at the end of his meeting with Trump suggested it could be in Moscow. That would be questionable, I think. Will there be a ceasefire or no? That is something that still European leaders are trying to push for. Will the Russians agree to anything? Because as you pointed out again before we started talking, so far they haven't agreed to anything. And actually, basically what we're celebrating is the fact that the Western allies, have agreed on something, right? That's the outcome from yesterday's meeting. So it is very interesting to see where this will go next. It seems to be positive, but as you say, there isn't a lot of realistic outcome from this. And maybe in a way, that was something that's safeguarded.
Yeah, and I think it's the good news is that it wasn't a disaster. And the disaster was in the air since Friday, when we have seen Vladimir Putin smiling in the presidential limousine, where he attended a trip from the airport to the office where they met with Donald Trump for talks that were prematurely ended, and then Putin and his delegation left before they actually sat down to talk about various policy issues that Americans were prepared to do. And that is, I think, more important still from the point of view of how this war goes on, how it may hopefully pause at least. And, let's hope for peace, but let's not be naive. There isn't peace because Putin's Russia, Putin's regime is irreversibly set on the war path. Its very existence, the very existence of the Russian regime today, of Putin's regime, is to wage war, is to prepare for war. Once they stop, they're done. And of course, they don't want to be done. And I don't mean just Putin or his doppelganger that apparently appeared in Alaska instead of Putin himself. You can read multiple analyses, and I don't think this is a conspiracy theory. There are biometrics, parameters analysis that have been conducted since 2022, showing that Putin is delegating to a number of meetings his doppelganger. Now, why for Russia war is so important? Well, it is important for Putin because it legitimizes his rule and deficiencies that come with it. Putin cannot provide a number of liberties that Russian got initially a sense of. In the beginnings of Putin regime, people felt like they could potentially become a Western-style middle class. By now, Russia, for all different reasons, is turning towards the Chinese model of state control over the population. It's actually aligning with China geostrategically. It is de facto an alliance between the two capitals in waging war against the world order. And the purpose is not to take over Ukraine. Ukraine is on the menu, but it's part of a bigger set. For Russia, for Putin, and for Beijing, it is about undoing the world order based on the international law, on the rules that include nations' self-determination principle that sets the boundaries, negotiates peacefully between democracies, rather than enforcing certain status quo by the power of the strongest. Russia believed it is stronger, but it turns out it is not as strong as it believed vis-a-vis Ukraine, and trying to undo the rules that, in the mindset of Vladimir Putin and the top leadership of Russia today, has undone the status USSR and Russia, in the center of it, has enjoyed in the middle of the 20th century. In the middle of the 20th century, USSR was racing against the US. It was a bipolar world after the Second World War, and Russians were believing they could have captured much more of Europe than they have. By 1970s, in Helsinki, they've been committing, much under economic pressure, not only, to a system of norms that guaranteed, under the Helsinki Conference, later the Helsinki Accords and the OSCE, to the principles of security and democracy in Europe that were the foundations of the international order. that eventually, one could argue, led to the peaceful dissolution and implosion of USSR. I mean, Ukraine and Belarus detached themselves from Russia on those principles that now Russia seeks to undo. And it can undo them by ridiculing and compromising the system of norms and values and principles through symbolic acts like in Alaska that would jeopardize the international system. And hopefully there will be no signature under any of what we have seen on the TV, but the pictures in TV, they also make the political reality next to written rules and documents. So that's the dangerous and most significant moment of the week, and I wanted to touch. And also, this is why it is, in a way, better for Poland not to be part of it, because Poland's geostrategic situation is rather precarious. Mountains are only to the south, so it will be harder for Hungarians to invade, but we're otherwise strategically exposed.
Hi, if you're enjoying this episode, why not subscribe to Visegrad Insight? This gives you access to all our latest content online, as well as to our live and online events. You can use our special promo code for Visegrad Insight podcast listeners to get 35% off. Just go to visegradinsight.eu, choose a yearly subscription, and apply code Visegrad35. And now, back to the podcast.
I'll come back to the Polish absence in a bit, because I wanted to ask you another question. But I just wanted to agree what you were saying about Russia and the regime under Putin now and how it's different. I mean, we saw this very much in the reactions from Poland after the meeting in Alaska. Radosław Sikorski said, the foreign minister, "I agree with Putin that for peace to come, the causes of aggression must be removed, but that cause is Russian imperialism." And this was in reference to something Trump said, where he said, or it was reported that one of the things that Putin talked about in the visit was not just, swapping territory or getting the Donbass, but also removing NATO forces from a lot of Eastern Europe as well. And then Donald Tusk said something similar. He said, "The game for the future of Ukraine, the security of Poland and all of Europe has entered a decisive phase. Today, it is even clearer that Russia only respects the strong, and Putin has once again proven to be a cunning and ruthless player." So very much repeating what you were saying. The reason, if I can touch on the weekly outlook this week, is there was another very different reaction to this summit from Viktor Orban, the Hungarian Prime Minister, and we tried to explain our thinking behind this and what he was trying to do in the weekly outlook, where he was really one of the few leaders satisfied with the outcome. He said, "For years, we have watched the two biggest nuclear powers dismantle the framework of their cooperation. That has now come to an end. Today, the world is a safer place than it was yesterday." And all of this kind of talk of peace, which is really appeasement in his case. And at the same time, what we try to highlight is how much Hungary is really investing in defense. And so there's this great Financial Times data visualization where it talks about the re-establishing of the military industrial complex in Europe, and Hungary as a leader of this, and really that hypocrisy from Viktor Orban. So very interesting. I don't know if you had more to add on this. Yeah.
No, I just wanted to add the news from today's morning when one of the portals by Georgi Gotev, a journalist, former editor of Euroactiv, who now runs his own outlet, has reported that he's got sources in the White House saying that a potential trilateral meeting might take place in Hungary, of all the places. I mean, I can see it's hard for me to imagine that will be taking place in Hungary, given the hostilities between Kiev and Budapest. Budapest recently also accusing Kiev of attacking a pipeline that provides energy supplies to Hungary from Russia. And of course, it is not operating, but still, such explosions and are jeopardizing a flow of energy and cheap energy supply is one of the founding elements of Orban's legitimacy. Well, actually, any legitimacy in Hungary for a political leader. So I can see hard time visualizing such a meeting, but I had also hard time visualizing Vladimir Putin in the limousine of Donald Trump. So things might happen. And we're forgetting how important here the Hungarian influence is as either transmission belt of ideas from Putin to the Western world, as a Trojan horse of political ideology sponsored or developed in Russia, or the confusion also that Orban initiates politically in the ranks of the West, and on the other hand, ambitions of Budapest to play a global role. I mean, Orban has been repeating that for so many years, that he foresees that in the global turmoil that currently is observable by everyone, Hungary may rise in its importance, its role, and its influence in global affairs, and in a way benefit from it. So I think that is interesting. That is not worth applauding, but it's definitely not worth ignoring. And we have to factor in the certain ambitions and abilities of the Budapest power game in influencing the course of these events.
I mean, you talked there about global influence and Hungary's aspirations. If I can return to the fact that Poland wasn't at the meeting yesterday between Trump and European leaders, I mean, one question, your idea that this kind of safeguarded actually Poland's image and principles. What one kind of counter to this would be, well, they weren't there, right? So they couldn't really exert that much influence. So I know I can see you shaking your head, but just to ask the question.
No, I agree. Go ahead. Yeah, what's the question?
But now some of this is, we haven't mentioned Karol Nawrocki, right? And the fact that actually for the meeting with Trump last week, Trump essentially asked, you can correct me on this, but Trump essentially asked that Nawrocki be the one that he speak to. And that's now the idea that for all future meetings at a presidential head of state level, it would be Nawrocki and not Donald Tusk who was representing Poland. And I feel like that was kind of an issue as well, where Poland didn't really necessarily want to send someone like Nawrocki to this meeting. Do you worry that this is kind of reducing Poland's impact?
I don't think Poland's impact can be reduced much beyond what it had self-reduced by choosing a continuous cohabitation. I mean, Poland is potentially likely to see again the realignment of how the chain of command is represented abroad. We have seen in the White House both the president and the prime minister, upon invitation by President Joe Biden before, and it was a strange moment when an American president wanted to see both leaders at the same table. Partly because Poland is a strange, politically speaking, and from the perspective of a unified chain of command in the United States, Poland is a strange animal. It's a difficult animal. So you can have a president coming to the office and saying one thing, and you seem to have an agreement or disagreement, depending on the political option and the message. And then the prime minister and the government would say something else. And in the context of Poland, it is the prime minister and the government, backed by parliamentary legitimacy, that dictates the policy, the foreign policy and security policy. And the president needs to agree, but the president has a strong toolbox also to disagree and do things on his own, as the current president, Mr. Nawrocki, seems to eye. So the self-inflicted damage is not just simply how the particular representatives and their, Donald Tusk, Karol Nawrocki, are embattled between each other, but how our system of governance does not allow that much opportunity unless we have a full unity. And I think on security affairs we have unity. As I said, this was not such an important issue for Poland to be at this table. And we will have a unified foreign and security policy nonetheless. This is one area where, in principle, we don't have disagreement between the two centers of power in Warsaw. But in terms of representation and these moments when there is this informal power is also important, of transmitting certain message ad hoc when you meet face-to-face with someone else. That of course might be lost, or there might be a challenge, and that limits the influence Poland seemed to have enjoyed in the past years. But let's not forget that in the past years there was also cohabitation. There was a president who was coming from a hostile camp, and he was not necessarily agreeing with the government. So I think it's very special at a different setting, and there is no additional damage externally exerted on Poland.
And that's all from this week's episode of the Visegrad Insight podcast, bringing you the leading voices from Central Europe and on Central Europe.
Make sure to subscribe, and we'll be in touch next week.